This is a Dell T420, and if you can't tell, it's quite large. Let's get out the calipers here. Place your bets. By my estimate, just this side alone is something a little over 20 Zip 100 discs squared. I had been eyeing this machine and its variants for quite some time. It's a little new for me. Came out in 2012. Because you might recognize these drive bays. They are the same as the PowerEdge enterprise servers of the era. I've got a couple of this guy's big enterprise rack mount brothers in my home lab. So the plan with this one is I want to have it in here, not on all the time of course. I think it's got like a 550 watt power supply and 2 Intel Xeons inside that are power hungry, but I want to turn this into a machine that makes it easy for me to interact with all sorts of hard drives. Obviously, I can interact with SATA and SAS on this front thing that has a backplane to a controller that we'll have to discuss, and we'll actually have to swap out the controller that's in there. And then we're going to get really weird. I also find myself needing to deal with IDE drives, various SCSI components and drives, and the Dell over there is PCI Express. I've got tons of these IDE, various SCSI connector PCI cards. So I picked up this bad boy. It's an ELF Gym. It theoretically can take a PCI Express lane and turn it into 2 PCI slots. You know, what could possibly go wrong with this strategy? Now I will admit, this is probably not the ideal computer to accomplish this with, but I want to come to some sort of cobbled together solution where I can have one machine, various Linux distros that are useful for dealing with disks, and I'll be able to deal with IDE, SAS, SCSI, SATA drives. That's the goal. We might not get there today, but we'll certainly be able to deal with SAS and SATA drives because this thing just natively supports them, and we'll be able to get hot swapping working so I can have the machine running and pop a drive in, start messing with it in the OS. That is the plan. So we're going to clean this thing up, boot it up, see what it's all about, see if it's working, replace some parts, mess around with hard drives, figure out the ideal set of operating systems to have on here. Probably going to want to have more than one. Let's get into it. First things first, let's have a walk around this thing, see what it's all about, take a look, we'll pop the lid, see what's going on. A viewer named Will, who happens to live in the same town I do, donated this to the channel, so huge thanks to Will. He was nice enough to meet up with me in town, and him and his niece came with this thing, and we got it in my car, so a huge thanks to him. He said he saved it from a copier dealership that I believe he works for, from e-waste. And you know I love saving e-waste. So the copier dealership aspect will be important as we continue to examine this thing. It's got a little bit of a history, I think. So of course it's got the 8 bays on the front. These are just little placeholder plugs, I think. Yeah, like that. Ooh, yeah. We got some cleaning to do. You'll see. Pretty typical. That means the machine was put to good use. But I was saying I might have more of these Caddies, at least a couple more. But they're very easy to come by on eBay. I believe it is populated the way it came from the factory, the way it was ordered. I think essentially I'm the second owner. So it's got 4 500 gig SATA drives. And I'm a little biased. The Dell PowerEdge enterprise servers are the first real big boy servers I ever owned. Bought them 6 years ago. And they have these same Caddies. And I think they're the best ones I've come across. I like these a lot. All the drives in there are the same. They're these 500 gig Dell branded SATA drives. Again, probably shipped with the machine when some sort of copier or whatever bought it. And Will was saying it might even show us a Xerox splash screen when it starts up. There might be some software on here still. We will find out. That's the hard drive bay situation. More than enough for my tinkering needs down here. Up towards the top, it's got a DVD recorder as well, so I think I can burn DVDs with this thing. That's another thing I'd kind of like to do. I'm going to get this on 2 networks, my home network, the Retro Rack network. This is the Retro Rack, if you're not familiar. This thing's going to be very familiar with both of them, and it'll be nice to be able to burn discs here. I have to do that all the time. And we've got this little control panel deal, some buttons here, reset button maybe, and then of course the power button. And then this is the information card from Dell. The enterprise servers do this as well. I guess I should be careful with my terminology here. This is an enterprise grade machine. It just happens to be in a desktop form factor, even though it's huge. Tons of zip disks. I'm too lazy to extend my camera tripod, but this thing here has a bunch of service tag information from Dell. It said it was manufactured on April 21st, 2014. So close. We almost got a T420 manufactured on 420. Yes, I know that's the weed number. No one cares. Let's plug this service tag into Dell's website, learn a bit more about this thing before we open it up. I'm more of a traditional man myself. Beer and nicotine. It's the only way you can deal with all this stuff. But here we are on the Dell website. I have plugged in the service tag, 9NMTK02, if you want to follow along at home. Dell made this website basically very YouTuber unfriendly. But the first thing we're going to do is look at the pro support. And this thing on the right comes up. So this thing was shipped May 2nd, 2014, and it had support until 2017, which makes sense. And then over here we can look at the product specifications, and we can sort of learn what this thing shipped with. Some of the more interesting parts are it probably, unless it got upgraded, has some Intel Xeon E5 2407 2.2 gigahertz processors. It's got 2 of those. And then it shipped with no power cord, 4 of them. It shipped with 4 no power cords. I'll admit, I've glanced inside and I was wondering like what the RAM situation was. I think I saw 8 sticks total, but it claims it shipped with 24 4 gig DDR3 modules, which I don't think that's what I saw in there, but we'll see. Maybe 24 gigs total. Anyway, I've never really plugged in any of my existing Dell servers into this tool. It's kind of cool to see. It did come with an H310 RAID controller, and I think it says no RAID, meaning Dell did not RAID it from the factory. And I believe they're trying to say there were 4 disks in there. I'm just kind of guessing here based on what I've physically seen and what I'm looking at here. The H310 will be important later because I wasted some money buying another H310 RAID controller. We'll talk about that later when we get into the nuts and bolts of this. I was actually thinking about that a little more. I wonder if this service tag is tied to like the lot order this company might have made, because there was like 4 of everything. For example, 4 no power cord orders. I wonder if like somehow that like is tied to 4 of these machines being bought. I'm not sure. Anyway, let's look at the back. We've got 1 power supply, and I think you could get models with dual, so redundant power supply. And then a ton of PCI slots with some interesting cards. We'll look at that in a second. Down here, the main board, just basic stuff. So right up here, we've got some iDRAC information. That stands for Integrated Dell Remote Access Controller, I think. Basically a way to remotely actually see what's going on the VGA port and administer the machine when it has power but it's not booted up. We'll be playing with that. I'm a little confused though. The 2 Dell servers I have also have iDRAC, but they have a dedicated network port. And this one does not. It has an arrow pointing that way. There's nothing up here. It's got an SD card config thing pointing up. Also nothing over here. So what I'm used to is having a dedicated network port that you would put this thing on the network, totally unrelated to the machine itself and whatever it's doing, and you could administer it. So we'll have to read some docs on that. Then we've got 6 USB ports. That's pretty nice. 2 onboard NICs, probably 1 gig. That is plenty for our purposes. And then a serial port and VGA. We will be needing that. Now, these funny connectors right here, I have seen similar cards where this is like a modem connector, but that was some like IBM stuff. So I was kind of scratching my head here. Of course, doing no research, just sitting here staring at it. And then I stared a little harder and saw this little sticker. It's got Dell T420 at the top, and it's calling those Solo PWBs. And there was at one point a graphics controller card. It is no longer with us, apparently. And then it's got some USB instructions about where you plug in the spectrophotometer. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's something related to the copier business that was using this thing. They have a special sticker they put here to help techs or whoever plug in all the right equipment. So when we pull these cards out, I'm obviously going to have no use for them. We'll see what, I'll look up the part number, see what's going on with that. Then on one side we've got a pull handle. Luckily it was unlocked because I don't have the key. And you kind of wrench it down like that, and it is quite serviceable. Got the classic enterprise style sticker on the inside of the lid with what's hot swappable, what is not, things like the memory configuration, for example. And I'm sure it's implied by now, but most of this thing is metal. So it's quite heavy. It's very, very well built. Here are those funny cards. I'm not gonna remove anything yet. We're gonna boot it up, see what's going on with those hard drives and everything, and then we'll start pulling stuff out. But we've got some SAS cables coming from the drive backplane into this H310 controller down here. So this guy is responsible for controlling your hard drives. We will have an in-depth discussion about him later. I've got a replacement. Those are those cables going off. And I did see way in here, we've got a SATA connector and another HBA SAS connector, I think. I'll have to go read the documentation about that. Anyway, we might be able to get an internal SSD sitting on that guy. That would be nice and not waste one of our bays. And then there's the 550 watt power supply hanging out back there. It of course takes 100 to 240 volts. Back to the point about this thing being an enterprise server. It's got a little switch to know if the lid is shut. So if that is out, all the fans will stay kicked on all the time. It won't do any fan management because it knows that airflow is compromised. Haven't played with it yet, but it looks like this toolless thing lets you take the whole SAS assembly out. Or I should say, probably just the DVD ROM. And yeah, okay. Nothing to do with the drives, just the 3 bays on the front here. Might have to come up with something cool to put in there. And then this is pretty typical of a enterprise machine. You've got a shroud for airflow covering the CPUs and the RAM. The CPUs are not going to have their own fans. So this looks like this just slides out. Looks like. I've obviously done this before. There are our big ol' Xeon processors, and it looks like we've got 6 RAM slots per processor. So this is for CPU 1, that's for CPU 2, probably. And 3 of them are populated. Let's see what we're dealing with. I think I have enough to kind of max this thing out in my stockpile. My 24 gig total RAM prediction was correct based on the Dell website. So we've got 6 total of these 4 gig, probably almost certainly DDR3 memory sticks. I do have plenty more I could put in here. We could we could max it out, but that doesn't seem like a good use of my time. So 24 gigs of RAM for this thing seems plenty good for me. So as you can see, there's a little bit of dust in this thing, but it's not grimy. It's all very loose. And so, unfortunately for me, I am going to lug this thing back upstairs to my garage. I'm in my basement right now, where I have an air compressor. I'm going to blow it all out, and I'll bring you back. Here's a little bit of a before. It is possible that I'm going to have to get in here with like a paintbrush or something, but I'm hoping the compressor does most of the work for me. It's not perfect, but it's certainly better than it was. No more dust down here. All the cards in there looking brand new. That was well worth it. There was so much dust in the power supply. Like no matter how many times I hit it from this direction or the other direction, just like clouds came out until I got bored and gave up. So we're better than if we had not done that. And then we still got some fine detail work left. There's dust in these little things. We'll deal with that as we pull the drives out. This was just from Windex on the case. And then I got this thing looking more or less brand new. Good enough for me. I guess I could get a Q-tip in there if I really cared, which I don't. Here's that lid switch mechanism. So the lid pushes against this button. This must plug in on the main board somewhere. One more thing of note physically about the case before we give it our first power up here. It's got these little feet on the bottom that you can flip out. Sort of like a IBM RS6000. It's amazing these are not broken. So I'm just going to leave them where they are, and I'm not going to use them that way. Otherwise, I'll break them. Got the Dell monitor, of course. Let's see if it powers up right away when I plug it in. No. iDRAC mode. This green power light blinked briefly, and then the iDRAC light was on. Now it's off. Let's just power it on. There we go. This is not noise canceled. I was wondering how loud it would be, since it was meant to be somewhere in an office, not really a data center. It's not quiet. It says system booting. It was complaining about a lid intrusion. Oh, there's the Xerox stuff. Yeah. That's like built into the PowerEdge firmware splash screen, the UFI splash screen. That's funny. So I wonder what's on these drives, if anything. Oh, it's quiet now. Yeah, I am liking how quiet that is. It's got 4 non-RAID disks, it says, so they were probably wiped. It's really quiet, for what it is. All right, seems to be healthy. It's doing nothing. So I wonder if it does have some software on it, but it's totally headless for whatever copier capabilities it was up to. I don't know. Initializing firmware interfaces. Is that the Dell, or is that an operating system that's running on this for copier stuff? It is collecting system inventory. Everything I dreamed. Very, very quiet. Very reasonable. It'll probably live somewhere on the ground down there by Chloe. She won't even notice. She definitely doesn't notice right now. Alright, boot failed. Windows Boot Manager, no boot device. That is completely fine. Now I actually have to decide what I want to do with this thing, how I want to set it up. I guess let's talk about the RAID controller. Another thing I was really worried about is that it would be like the rack mount servers and take minutes to boot up. But this thing is very fast. That's exciting. So now we got to talk about RAID controllers, HBA cards, hard drives, SAS, all that stuff. This is pretty important when you want to get into the home labbing game, especially if you're going to deal with enterprise servers. I'm particularly familiar with Dell servers, so I kind of had a leg up when I picked this thing up. These are all the lines coming from the 8 drives into this controller here. Typically, on an enterprise server, you're going to have a RAID controller, and it's going to do what's called hardware RAID. So this card itself is responsible for organizing the drives and showing them to the motherboard. RAID originally stood for Redundant Array of Inexpensive Disks, and then they rebranded to Redundant Array of Independent Disks, which probably is more generic and makes more sense. David Patterson, a very famous computer scientist, and a few other folks invented RAID. David Patterson was also very involved in RISC. Fun fact for you, I used to work once upon a time with one of his sons. I don't know if he has more than one kid. Anyway, in another life I worked with one of his sons. Never met David, but now you know. In a nutshell, RAID lets you take a bunch of disks and combine them into one as far as the OS is concerned with a bunch of redundancy. So you can have several disks in here. The operating system, Linux, Windows, whatever, thinks you have one logical disk, and behind the scenes it is replicating data to multiple disks so that one or more can fail, depending on your RAID level. Now this is all fine and good in the typical Windows enterprise case where you have a hardware RAID controller, Windows doesn't know a thing about the disks, and you have redundancy, and this card is taking care of whether or not you can swap one out and put one in and all that. One problem is if this card goes bad, you need to get an identical one to restore your array. I'm kind of oversimplifying that, but I'm also getting a little too in the weeds. Basically, what I want is that when I plug in any hard drive into this thing, I want Linux to be able to see it. And that's not what's going to happen with this hardware RAID controller. I'm going to have to go into the firmware of this thing after a post and get into a special menu that lets me configure the drive and expose it to Linux. Now some controllers can be flashed with special firmware called IT mode, which you think would stand for information technology, just because it actually stands for initiator mode. I don't really know what that means, it's some scuzzy crap. But anyway, if you have a hard drive controller card in IT mode, it accesses something called an HBA, Host Bus Adapter. And what that does is make it as if the motherboard, in my case I have 8 drives, makes it as if the motherboard has 8 drive connectors and Linux, or whatever operating system, just sees 8 drives. And then it can do whatever it wishes with those drives. Has hardware access level to the drives. This is very desirable for a home labber because you're typically going to run something like Unraid or TrueNAS. You're going to want an IT-flashed RAID controller that lets it just pass the drives through to the main board essentially, and therefore the OS, and then something like TrueNAS and Unraid can see the drives, and they manage a software RAID. So the RAID is managed at the software OS level, so to speak, and not down in this card. This card is just passing them through on the PCI lane. And so for my use case, I would like to just plug a drive into the front of this thing, boot up, or maybe even hot swap the drive in. Well, I guess it's not a swap. Hot plug the drive in, and I want Linux to be able to see it. This card in its current setup won't do that. I would have to reboot the machine, get into this card, expose the drive, blah, blah, blah. Huge pain. At this point, you might be asking yourself, well, Collab Retro, how do you know all this stupid crap? Well, that's because I've done it before. 6 years ago, I bought a Dell PowerEdge R510 with 12 bays on the front, 2 bays inside, and I turned it into a TrueNAS server. This is the RAID controller that originally came with that Dell R510. I don't know which one this is, a PERC or HERC something. You cannot flash this to IT mode, to the best of my knowledge. So I bought another version on eBay that was pre-flashed to IT mode, pulled this one out, put that one in, and now I have a TrueNAS server. And I hadn't really thought about any of this stuff for a long time until I picked up this machine and decided I wanted to use it as my hard drive machine. And I physically had it in my possession and did not come down here and look and see that it did indeed have a PERC H310. What was Dell doing? The Percocet H310? The 420 machine? Give me a break. Anyway, I got some bad info online. You can flash this to IT mode, these H310s. I thought I had some other controller card that was not flashable to IT mode, very similar to the one I pulled out of my other Dell. Some of them, a lot of them, are flashable, so you can look up a lot of great YouTube videos. There's a bunch of tutorials online. You plug these into a machine with a PCI Express slot, you load up some sort of DOS image or something. Anyway, you can flash these to IT mode. They use very common LSI chipsets. This is one such card, but I suppose I have saved myself some trouble by simply buying one on eBay that is already flashed into IT mode. So we should be able to pop this thing in, and it will just expose every disk plugged in to the backplane, all 8 of them, to whatever operating system is running. In our case, I've been doing a little thinking, it's probably going to be whatever latest version of Ubuntu exists. Now I know what you're saying. Ubuntu, that's so 2014. I'm just very comfortable with Ubuntu. All the tutorials to do anything you'd ever want to do are with Ubuntu. I guess I could put Debian on it, but we're just going to throw Ubuntu on it. I'm going to get a SSD in one of these drive bays. We're going to format, I think I have like a 250 gig disk. We'll give the first, I don't know, half of that disk to Ubuntu, and then I'll leave the rest unpartitioned, and then that opens us up to be able to install at least one other operating system and dual boot. I don't think I'm going to need Windows on this. I got plenty of other Windows options. This is going to be my, actually get work done machine. Linux. This is going to be my boot drive. I bought 2 of these in 2023 for $78. I just used the last one in the last video. And they're the same price now in 2026, which I guess is all you can hope for these days. These weird cards got to come out because I don't need them. Looks like you can flip these from the inside. It's all toolless, of course. Let's go look these up. They're identical. They're rocking the Vertex 5. Probably some sort of FPGA. See if I can find anything online about them. The AI slot machine Google Clanker tells me that they are network controllers for Xerox free flow print servers, which does add up based on my other research and the fact that this thing starts up and says it's from Xerox. How about you give me a source other than eBay? That's not a good source. There are like 2 Google results. You don't see that very often. Anyway, as expected, something to do with Xerox copiers or printers or something. Then we gotta get this theoretically not flash to IT mode H310 drive controller out. On that Dell R510, the connectors were broken. I think the cables were actually broken. Yeah, this one's kind of tough too. Yeah, it was stuck. This one's stuck just like the other one. On my Dell in the other room, the cable, it was so hard to get out. Like, oh, this one's doing the same thing. This must be a common problem. There we go. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to film this. They look slightly different. So the one I just pulled out has a sticker on this chip. That is for my own future reference, in case I mix these cards up. It's the same card, even though it looks a little different chip markings. And even in this thing, so this is easy mode. These cables are perfectly routed in a rack mount server. Very hard to deal with. There's not even a lot of leeway on these. I did a lot of research to make sure I at least theoretically thought those cables were going to fit in this card, and at the time I was doing that research I didn't realize I was buying the identical card, just in IT mode. I was doing some brief research on at least this connector, and it sounds like that is only for optical drives, so not hard drives basically. There's no onboard hard drive controller. There's a bunch of weird stuff in here. There's like another PCI. All of that is to say we will be pulling these drives out, and I'll clean these drive trays. I'll put these drives on the stack of my other pile of drives, and we'll get the SSD card installed probably in slot 1. I'll probably remember that. Make a note to myself here. Dell T420 H310, and it fits in the plastic that the other one came in. Gonna unscrew these Dell drives, and then I'll show you one of the best parts of these trays. These 500 gig drives weigh nothing. It's like pretty sad. Or perhaps that is the progress of technology. You can get 500 gigs into nothing. This is 240 after all, and it weighs nothing, and that doesn't surprise me, so I don't know. So these trays. So these were all SATA drives in there, and oddly enough, this one is just SATA. This one says SAS and SATA. I don't know, is it SATA or SATA? I go back and forth all the time. But some of these have all these weird little extra holes in them. And this one that supports both are actually the only trays I've ever seen. And so you've got the SATA hole and a SAS hole. Let me put this SATA drive back in for you and line it up. Anyway, at the end of the day, it ends up with the SAS holes anyway. This is the drive that was in there. And now we'll throw my little guy in here. Very low profile, right? And look at that. It's got a spot there for a screw and a spot there for a screw. And you don't need any little conversion kit. To be fair, it required a slightly different screw, which I found one of in my pile. But the point is, this screams to me like, we care about the customer. We don't know what they're going to put in here. We know literally the options they have, but we're not going to force them to buy special sleds. We're just going to make the drive sled work with anything that is, you know, reasonable at this point in time. And I like that. That's why I like these Dell machines, at least these ones from this era. I'm going to say something that's going to alarm most of you, and it alarms me. 2014 was 12 years ago. A lot of the time with these drive sleds, you got to get like a special little conversion kit, and it pretends it's a normal drive, so you can plug in or screw in one of these drives. I'm looking at you, IBM. Dell didn't do that. They were just like, yeah, give them all the right holes. Let them do what they want with their hardware. Wow, what a novel concept. Anyway, there's only one screw in this guy, but I'm pushing pretty hard. He's not really going anywhere. And just like that. Easy. I'm going to get the rest of these out of the sleds. I'm going to slide them in. We've got a million of these screws, so don't have to worry about losing those. And then we'll try to install an OS on this thing, I think. And hopefully we don't have to mess at all with that RAID controller we just plugged in. Theoretically, the installer should just see it and it won't be a big deal. The Dell drives are out, the sleds are back in. We've got my SSD in this one. Let's get an operating system on this guy. Just downloaded a fresh copy of Ubuntu Desktop. I am going to install the desktop version with the GUI just in case I want to mess around with that in the future. The vast majority of the time I'm just going to SSH into it from this machine right here Maybe in this video we'll set up our SSH keys. So I'm using Balena Etcher, I don't know how to say it, to flash that ISO to a USB stick. And I'm pretty sure that machine is going to let us boot from... Oh my gosh. This is a nightmare. This is why I just burned DVD-ROMs. I see. Etcher was doing its thing and Windows decided it needed to be involved. Case in point, why I want a Linux machine over there with a ton of hard drive bays, ton of USB ports, gonna get it permanently set up so I don't have to deal with any of this Windows crap when I'm doing stuff. Theoretically have that Ubuntu ISO flashed right here. First thing we're gonna do is power this thing up and see if it recognizes that RAID controller that we just put in and make sure we can get into the BIOS, look at the boot order and all that stuff. I guess the first thing I should have done was figure out the iDRAC situation, but we've got time for that. The problem with these videos where I already kind of know what I'm doing, or I've sort of done it before, is I just can't stop talking. I'm just yapping, so gotta stay focused. Sorry. First thing these Dell machines do is configure memory, and I'm thinking I will get a screen where I can press something. We're initializing the iDRAC. All good. Right, I brought this machine from a 0 power state to essentially full on. I flipped the power switch and pushed the power button right away, so the iDRAC wasn't running yet. That'll make more sense later when we hopefully access the iDRAC. Okay, here's our Xerox splash screen, F2 system setup. I think I maybe wanted to go to UEFI boot manager actually, but that's okay. We do have 2 of those 2.2 gigahertz quad core processors. Here's the RAID controller. So it sees it, and it sees 1 non-RAID disk. Yeah, that thing is healthy. PCI H310, I'm excited about that. It is pretty slow to get into the BIOS on these enterprise machines, at least these Dell ones in my experience. These fancy BIOSes where you can like use a mouse will like never not blow my mind. Excuse me, Chloe. So we're gonna get into system BIOS. This PowerEdge T420 was manufactured by Xerox. Can you believe that? Boot settings. Boot mode, UEFI, that is fine. The Windows boot manager, we don't want that. We've got this unavailable Ubuntu option. Someone's been in here. That'd be so annoying if I couldn't boot from USB. I can boot from the network. Windows Boot Manager is definitely not involved in this. I'm gonna go Google if you can boot from a USB. I might have to boot from the normal BIOS, maybe? Oh, that's one interesting thing you can do. It probably has a USB port hiding in there somewhere, and you could theoretically run your OS off of that. Yeah, I don't really want to. I suppose I could do that. I don't want to do that. I'm looking at the options for that embedded SATA port. This is really implying to me that I could put a hard drive on there. We might have to experiment with that later. Well, dang, that's pretty disappointing. I'm not seeing anything about being able to boot from a USB stick. Whack. Well, I'm looking at the iDRAC settings, and it looks like it shares one of the onboard networking ports. So it is on the second one at the moment. Its DNS iDRAC name is Bebop. I'm gonna leave that. And it is already on the network I can use. Let's see about that. This is the iDRAC. I decided to put it on my home network. 192.168.1.9 is its IP now, because this is kind of like a shop machine. It will have access to the RetroArch network, but that's how I want to set it up. So the default is root, and the password is Calvin. But I have to imagine they changed that. Yeah. Wonder how you reset one of these. I've never had to do this before. The documentation said to press and hold the iDRAC button right here for at least 16 seconds, and that the fans would rev up, which they did while the iDRAC restarted. The system's still running, and I'm still sitting in the BIOS menu. And if I'm understanding this correctly, it'll keep its IP. I suppose we can find out. So I can go to View, enter iDRAC IP. That is the IP I set. And so theoretically, it should have a default username and password right now. That didn't work. Some weird stuff's going on. I rebooted and got into that UEFI boot menu, F11, and it noticed that the H310 was different. Some firmware update needed to take place or something. It's doing that now. I don't know why it didn't do this the last time I booted. Look at this. We are performing a RAID platform update. I had no say in this, by the way. It just decided it was time. It rebooted. And it looks like I'm going to be entering something called the lifecycle controller instead of being able to choose what I want. Maybe it'll go into the boot menu thing like I wanted. I could hit Control R to manually configure the software that's on that controller I put in, that H310. The lifecycle controller is still doing some work. So I don't know if this thing stores configuration about its hardware setup on the main board somehow. Some configuration settings there, like in the BIOS and the UEFI BIOS. I don't know. I think that's what it's doing. It's getting acquainted with our new controller. It restarted a million times. I'm going to do an F11 to get into the boot manager. Hopefully it's happy with its physical hardware configuration now. So I don't regret blowing all the dust out, but if you've ever done this before, basically the act of doing that is going to get new dust on components that get hot, and it takes time for it to kind of burn that off, so to speak. So it is a little, I don't know, unpleasant in here. You can tell this machine is on, is what I'm saying. And that'll get better over time. I'm not going to go dunk all these components in the sink or anything. It's too much work. Alright, so what I'm hoping here is that USB stick might show up. It is. See that bad boy right here? That's my USB stick. I plugged it into the back, and I think you can do a one-off boot. You certainly can. So that's what you do. You get into F11, you select your device, and we are going to install Ubuntu. Oh yeah, baby. This is the newest Ubuntu I've ever installed. That's a pretty fancy little spinner they got going there. Few minutes later, we're at the Ubuntu installer. So, yeah, Linux, Ubuntu anyway, had these live disks where you could use the OS right off the CD-ROM, way before Windows was doing anything that cool. I remember this just blew me away in college in the mid-2000s. Anyway, I'm going to install Ubuntu. Hopefully it's uneventful and I won't bore you with it. Oh, just one note. So that 240 gig drive, I've given it the boot partition thing, of course, and then I've given this install 100 gigs. That leaves me with another 138 gigs. So at the bare minimum, I'll be able to dual boot another OS on there if I wish. I think that's what I'm going to do. And we're going to call this Clab Tower. You got to be kidding me. System program problem detected. I can't report the problem, but I would like to see what it was. Oh my gosh, what is this? How about you show me what happened? What do we got here? Unexpected error while running command. Unshare. Failed to register EFI boot entry. Cannot allocate memory. Yeah, that seems pretty bad. Well, I'm going to start that over and not do any of the partitioning stuff because I obviously don't know what I did. This is ridiculous. Restart and install updates. You just told me it didn't work. Sure, go ahead, bud. Good luck. Well, I restarted it without the USB stick in, of course, and here we are. It's working just fine. That will come back to haunt me when this install is corrupt in some weird way I don't understand until I'm trying to do something important. Now this is interesting. I'm looking at the network configuration here, and remember this thing has two physical Ethernet ports on the back, and theoretically the iDRAC is sharing the second one. The documentation said they share that physical port and you can access the iDRAC IP and another one on it, and that must be the case. So let's look at the configuration for that. It has taken an IP over DHCP from my home network, so theoretically we're online, and then my RetroRack network, which I plugged into port 1, also handed out an IP. I'm going to configure some static IPs for this thing so I can keep track of it, but theoretically we're online. It's not the snappiest thing in the world, I must say. It's definitely on the internet, on my home network, which is good. So let's get in here. This will be the RetroRack network. We are going to give it a manual IP. Ugh, this is a gross interface. Okay, he's going to be 10.00.80. And then on my home network, let's give him a manual address. He can be 192.168.110 on that interface. Let's see if we can ping something out on the RetroRack. We can. And then of course my home network. And we can. Okay. Solid progress. Next up, I still don't have access to the iDRAC, the remote access controller. And there's probably a bunch of ways to do this. I probably didn't do it right before. There's probably a reset setting in the BIOS settings. But what we're going to do is install the iDRAC tools for Linux. So iDRAC stands for Integrated Dell Remote Access Controller, and they provide a rack admin CLI that lets you interact with the thing. And amazingly, because I plugged the serial number in for this thing earlier, Dell knows that, and it's asking me which product can we help you with, and I'm going to click my machine. Of course, Ubuntu's not on here. Let's say they don't just have like a generic Linux option. SUSE Linux? Come on. Not even a Debian-based Linux. Let's do not applicable. Driver not compatible with my not applicable operating system. Thanks, Dell. Right on the page it says support added for Ubuntu 2204. Obviously that was a few years ago. That's fine. I think we're going to have to do it on hard mode. We're going to have to download the tarball. Okay, I'm going to go do this on the other machine. Because it's on the internet, very novel experience for me messing with machines down here. I think you do have to be careful to download a version of the tools for Linux that are compatible with your machine. So since this is a pretty old machine, or older machine, it's not that old, I'm going to download this version. And Dell makes it pretty easy. They've got a compatible systems list. And there we go, PowerEdge T420. So I think I'm going to download this thing. It's only 10 megs. I'll get it installed. They have easy, theoretically, instructions. So I'm just going to do this and we'll be back. I untart it. They claim it's as simple as this. Nice. Yeah, that's not going to work. Line 57. Seems like reasonable bash to me. I don't think this package I downloaded supports Ubuntu. I found a newer version, 11 or something, and it's got some Ubuntu folders. I don't know, man. Okay. Getting closer. I'm thriving right now. Taking me back to my youth of just randomly running stuff on Ubuntu to see if it'll work and solve your problem. I have the rack admin thing installed, and I think it's talking to the iDRAC and the lifecycle controller and my BIOS. So I first just blindly followed this gist from some guy about how to do it. That didn't work. Messed up my affairs very badly. So then I followed some official documentation from Dell about a Ubuntu version two versions older than mine and power edges I don't care about. And this worked. They got any sort of help on this thing? They do. Okay, let's try to reset the thing. Supposedly, we run rack admin rack reset config. Dang, did that work? No way. Okay, so it's resetting the iDRAC, and the Dell documentation, not some random guy on GitHub, says that it should be root Calvin as the user password after I do this. And they're not kidding. It does take a few minutes for the iDRAC to start up. The unfortunate part of doing that is that it also reset everything, so my iDRAC IP has changed. Let's see if there's a command to set that back to what I want. I must say, this is very Sun Microsystems of them. This is some LOM Solaris stuff going on. Did some Sun guys go and work for Dell? So I'm asking the iDRAC about its network interface card settings. Of course, it's totally defaulted now. I need to set it to the second port. It's on the first port. I'm trying to see where the IP is assigned. Okay, I'm going to find all the commands I need to run. Think I got it. It spits out a bunch of warnings every time you run a command about a default username and password, which is exactly what I want. So I'll show you what I did. It was a handful of commands. First, I set the NIC to LOM2. That's the second Ethernet port. I enabled static IP. I disabled DHCP, I set the address, I set the net mask, and I set the gateway. In the moment of truth, can we log in to the iDRAC? Its host name is no longer Bebop. Bebop is not with us anymore. Anyway, it's root Calvin for some reason. I'd like to know the history behind that. Come on. Oh yeah. This is beautiful. I'm going to keep the default password because otherwise I'm not going to remember it. And I'm going to say, don't show this warning again. The beautiful Dell iDRAC. One thing to watch out for is this is like an express version or something. It doesn't have enterprise licensing. So it's missing some pretty critical features. So for example, on an enterprise license, you can view the virtual console. So you can view the machine. I'll show you on one of my Dells. So when you're buying these Dells, it's worth looking out for that and making sure it has the license you're expecting for what you're attempting to do. But I think we can look at some basic stuff like the temperature and everything, and you can obviously power on, power off the system. It's pretty useful. yeah, we can see CPU 1 is 91 degrees Fahrenheit, CPU 2 86. This is temperature, but you can look at power usage over time and everything. Let me log into my R720, which has the same version, iDRAC 7, but I have an enterprise license on that because that's what was with the machine when I bought it. So here's my server, the Dell R720, and you can see I never changed my host name either. I left it on root Calvin just for simplicity. Like I was saying, mine has an enterprise license, so I have this virtual console thing, which I can launch in this modern browser, believe it or not. It's actually just a Proxmox instance, and I installed a GNOME or whatever. Anyway, you can use the machine this way, so that's something to look out for. I went ahead and enabled SSH on that machine, which is sitting right over there, but now over the network, I can log in. I'll set up my keys later. And here we are, logged into Clab Tower. Let's do an ls block. And what it knows about is the one hard drive, that SSD drive that we used as our root drive. Now, the dream is I can plug some other hard drives into it. Here's my root drive. I do like that the LED indicators are working. That's good news. So let's get a couple of these trays out. Get some drives back in this thing. So we're going to get one of the original Dell SATA drives back in a tray. I didn't think that through very well, obviously. And then I've got this IBM Power Systems IBM drive, and it is a smaller form factor. And this is a situation I recently found myself in where I needed to mess with a bunch of these drives. And it would have been really nice to have a machine dedicated right here for me to inspect them and do whatever I needed to do. And I was getting all ahead of myself, putting this little adapter in. I was in IBM mode. I don't need to do that per my previous explanation. I'm going to put one screw right there. And that's all I need to do to use this drive. And then I'm basically going to do the same thing for this Dell drive that was already in this caddy. I'm just going to throw one screw in there. And when I'm messing around, that's going to be good enough to just pop a drive in and see what it's all about. I think I mentioned earlier, for these smaller form factor drives, you do need a slightly different screw. And I've got one that's kind of protruding. Let's see if it'll slide in. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to work out. And so with the machine running, we'll slide the Dell drive into the second slot. Saw a green light. Try to slot this in. I don't know if it's going to physically fit. Looks like it will. Yeah. Also green. Very nice. They blink for a little bit and then eventually go solid green, which is good. However, if we do an ls block again, I think it only sees one of them. So this is my root drive. This is the Dell drive that came with the machine originally. It saw that no problem. And if we go to demessage, let's see here. We can see SDB getting attached. That is the Dell drive, I think. I don't know why it doesn't see the IBM drive. I wonder if I don't have a SAS controller. I reseated it. The H310 can definitely do SAS drives, so these are two SATA drives. Let's try another SAS drive. This is a Dell Constellation ES, just for science. Those IBM drives are kind of weird. My Dell R720 could detect these. Also, a couple of them were bad in the lot, so maybe we'll try another one. I'm not sure. Maybe this drive's just bad. Still pretty happy though. Let's get this Dell SAS drive in there. Green light blinking away. I can hear it spin up. Another LS block. And yeah, sure enough, it sees that SAS drive. So SAS is working. This is a 1 terabyte SAS drive. This is good. Let's try another IBM drive. Even if we can't get these IBM drives to work, I think you're seeing the dream here. So I can hot swap drives in here. These two worked just fine. That's still going to be super useful. This was spun up. It was spinning when I pulled it out. About like 19 of these things. And at least one has been bad so far, so it could just be a bad drive. All right, fresh IBM Power Systems drive. These are an odd block size. And yeah, I've done some videos about IBM in the past. It'd be a bummer if this didn't work, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. It'll just be something to explore in the future. The controller is acknowledging it physically. If this doesn't work, we'll just move on and I'll figure that out later. I still like that I can just swap drives in here. It still doesn't see it. If I go to dmessage, I just get notes about the last successful drive it attached. So, that will be something to figure out in the future. It's the next evening, so I gave this thing a full reboot with the IBM drive in there. And I timed it this time. It takes about 4 minutes from cold boot, meaning the iDRAC is off, so I have to wait for it to initialize till I'm in the desktop. That's not bad at all for an enterprise machine. And if I left it plugged in but turned off, the iDRAC would always be initialized, and it'd be even faster, I think, maybe shave 30 seconds off. But on the splash screen for the drive controller, it only sees 3 drives, even though all 4 LEDs are lit up. Now the Dell R510 I've got in the rack over there. I was looking up what I bought on eBay all those years ago. It has an H200 RAID controller flashed in IT mode, and it can see these little IBM drives just fine. So maybe I need to explore getting a different RAID controller for this to truly see all drives. And look at this even. The machine is definitely aware that that drive is in there. It's complaining that I just removed it. But the RAID controller we slapped in never sees it, so the OS never sees it. Moving on. Let's see what kind of ridiculous setup we can concoct with this thing. So the deal with this thing is this goes into one of your PCI Express lanes as a USB port coming off the back. You plug in this board to that, and then you also need to power this board with SATA power, and it came with a tiny little extension. So I didn't really think this through. This is going to have to be outside the case physically for me to plug PCI cards into it. And of course, they don't seat properly with that thing, so you got to set it like that. And I was poking my head in here, and I don't really have a good way to steal power from this without a bunch of splitters and extenders that I could buy. This is the SATA power. It ultimately comes out of this backplane for the drives and snakes its way up into here, it looks like. So let's see if we can get this out, just for now. So this is what I'm working with. What I'm saying is this is not going to be the permanent setup. Ideally, I will find a PCI Express card that supports the SCSI that I need, and we won't be doing any of this stuff, but let's mess around. I'm very, very curious if Linux detects this thing. So I think what I have to do is get this outside the case somehow. Come on, you can do it. You know, just like that. Again, I must stress, this is not how I'm going to leave it. We're just experimenting for science here. Why won't you go in? And bam, we've got the USB going to the PCI Express card inside. We've got a little extender adapter thing to plug in our SATA power. We're cooking with SCSI now. There's also very important instructions in the Amazon listing for this thing. The front of the card should not be facing the USB port. You know, if you were going to do this yourself, which I'm sure you were going to. There we go. Yep, I like it. Can't really think of anything that can go wrong, so let's find out. Well, I'm kind of rooting around with LSPCI, and I'm pretty sure, long story short, it's not being identified at all. There are other PCI Express to PCI bridges on here, but I think they're related to the iDRAC, and not the thing I'm looking for. So I was taking a closer look at the documentation, and it says the SATA power port only supports 5. I do not... In what world would I want to ask Alexa about this? Let's see what she has to say. She says, hi, yeah, do it. We're so cooked. No one needs this. Why is there no option to not have that there? Like, look what you got to do. Where'd you go? I'm going to get you, buddy. Get out of here. What are we doing? What are we doing? Anyway, as you recall, I think I had a 4-wire SATA connector. So I'm trying to find like something interesting to plug into this machine. I mean, sure, we got SAS and SATA working. sort of, but haven't done much else other than turn this machine on a few times and install Ubuntu. But I really don't have a lot of PCI Express stuff. I'm kind of looking through my crap here. Got this thing, the AT&T Starland network card. It's ISA though. That's not going to help us. This will be in a video someday. A lot of like PCI-X stuff. Yeah, that's ATM PCI stuff. You can see I'm very well organized. There's a bunch of DDR2 RAM. Yeah, not a lot of candidates. A lot of these are network cards. Oh, let me show you this one. I think that's PCI-X. Anyway, this is a video card for like a power machine, IBM stuff. I think that's what it is anyway. Will we get a visitor? Oh, no. I thought Chloe was out there. I did find this. It's another RAID controller. PCI Express. Looks like it's from 2009, but it's looking awfully compatible with this Dell. It's got an LSI chipset. That was pretty typical. Just for fun, one last hurrah in this video. Let's throw this in and see what it is. Undid all my cabling shenanigans, and I have half a mind to give control of 4 of the 8 drives to this thing. However, as you saw, oh, that cable came out pretty good. Let's see here. Oh, they will. They'll make it. I don't really want to split these up. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to... We're just going to totally confuse this machine after I got it all set up. We're going to plug these into this mystery card. They just barely reach. Or maybe they don't. There we go. They're kind of pulling on it. Oh, I see. I think there's a clip right here. We can undo that temporarily. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Got a little breathing room now. This is going to, I suspect, make the machine reconfigure itself. That's okay. We're going to pull my Ubuntu drive, and we're going to throw one of these IBM disks back in. See what it thinks about that. So I'm going to try to catch it right after this. I'm assuming it's going to show me whatever controller that is. I guess my other one's already in there, and I'll have to catch it at the right time to see what drives it sees. I don't know if you heard that squeak, but Chloe has arrived. That's the Ethernet card. This was the onboard SATA. 0 disks found in my PERC H310, that's fine. Can you only have one of those in there? I don't really like where this is going. Chloe's getting nervous. Just doing the life cycle controller stuff. What do we think, Chloe? I can't imagine it's not okay to have more than one RAID controller in one system. Though I was reading some of these machines, I think the 510 I've got with the 12 bays, you can only put a Dell RAID controller in that particular PCI slot that it comes in from the factory or something like that. I don't remember. Chloe's getting ready to hook up some printers. Oh, there she goes. I don't know how she gets back there. There she goes. Chloe. She gave up. Chloe, you're making a mess. Yeah, it's still trying to use my old configuration. I'm just going to put everything back the way it was. I don't really know where I was going with this anyway. I never did clean out the dust from these trays. I said I was going to. And we're back. Good machine. Remember I was talking about I blew out that dust and it was pretty rough in here. But a few hours last night, a few hours today running this thing, no smell at all. This is going to sound really weird, but it arguably smells good. Like cologne or something, especially when you're in there. I find that kind of odd. I think we're going to wrap it. I'm just filming for the sake of filming at this point, so... I am going to get an absolute ton of use out of this thing. Didn't get quite where I wanted to by the end of this video. I need to do a little more research. I think probably I'm going to forgo the IDE setup. I'll rely on USB to IDE converters, which I have many of, and I'll just figure out how to use them more appropriately with Ubuntu or whatever other operating systems I put on this thing. I am interested in SCSI though. I think what I'm going to do is get a PCI Express SCSI card. Those look pretty expensive, though I did find a few reasonable options on eBay, so we'll explore that. Let me know any recommendations you might have. You're going to see this thing again. It would be a really good option for a full-blown DNS server in the retro rack. It could run all sorts of services in the retro rack. Boots up in less than 5 minutes. I can mess around with it in here over SSH, and of course physically with a mouse and keyboard. This is going to be an absolute workhorse down here, I suspect. A huge thanks once again to Will and his niece, who were not kind enough to meet up with me and get this thing to me. I'm really happy that it has the Xerox splash screen. That like cracks me up. I love knowing the history of these things. I will admit I'm a little bit of a Dell PowerEdge fanboy. Like I was saying, I've got two enterprise rack mount PowerEdges in the other room there. I've been running them around the clock for over half a decade, and I gotta admit, I basically never had a problem with them. They're a rock solid series of machines. The only problem is they're just so power hungry now and outdated. I don't even like put them to the test in terms of the stuff I'm trying to accomplish on them. It's just not very PowerEdge effective to run them for much longer, so I think I will need to upgrade the home lab and save a few bucks on the power bill soon. But this guy is just going to be booted up on demand. I think it's going to be really useful down here. Thanks once again for watching. I know it doesn't seem like it the past few months, but I am trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. The video content will pick up pretty rapidly, I suspect, in the next few weeks here, and I'll get on a more regular cadence. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and of course I'm on Patreon. I post behind the scenes type videos, little updates about what I'm working on, and you also get access to the Searreport Discord, which I frequent quite often. That's going to do it for the Dell T420. I've had my eye on one of these for a very long time, so once again, thanks to Will for passing it my way. I'll catch you in the next video.